All right, we are live.
That snow coming definitely snuck up. I don't know why I didn't
Yeah.
notice that.
Well, I don't think anybody noticed it.
Well, people who watch the weather probably noticed it.
Well, they were.
I certainly didn't. Be shoveling tomorrow. That's gonna that'll affect some plans a little bit. I think it's gonna change things up a
Yeah.
little bit, but it's okay. I don't know if they're gonna have the. I bet you they don't have the lecture tomorrow.
They probably will cancel it, which is the smart thing to do.
I guess so. I guess so. Yeah.
Morning, Estella and Ben and Maria.
Let's go. Maria, not Maria
Maria.
Black.
Yep.
Oh my goodness gracious! Lucky
Morning,
us.
James, Caleb.
Mm. Good morning, everybody. Good morning,
Yeah,
everybody.
Caleb, we decided to mix it up and do it today instead of Sunday.
Yeah, we've been mixing up. Did we use? Am I crazy? We used to do them on Saturdays regularly, didn't we?
Yep.
But then we
And
decided
then
to mix
start
it up
mix
a
it up
little
a little
bit
bit. Yep.
for different reasons because our life
Morning,
and
Matthew
other stuff
from
is stuff going on.
Charleston.
Charleston, we'll be going to visit Charleston pretty soon, Mary. We're talking about it.
Morning,
Sometime
Scott.
maybe the summer, the spring. Who knows? It's all on your schedule, probably.
Oh, Bill Etzgorn.
Oh, the gang is all here. The
Yep.
gang is all here.
Howdy ho.
Howdy ho, howdy ho. So what's going on in this cold and gray morning here? Summer is definitely over, Mary. No question about that. It is going to be cold. It is going to be colder than your soul next week. It's going to be very, very chilly tomorrow. This week, it's going to be bad. You
No.
I know. Um, but we'll see.
James just said sorry about the Fincher. He's talking about the genealogy stuff I looked into last week.
I thought you.
Morning, Jim.
I thought you found some stuff on that. Am I crazy, or did you?
No, I haven't yet.
Oh, okay. Anyway, so what's going on with you, Mary? Good to see you up and at 'em this morning.
Yep.
Good time last night at Eddie's around the
always
corner
good
from
at
here,
Eddie's.
and so somehow we were able to get ourselves up today and get the episode posted, even though it was one day late because someone didn't do it last night.
Whatever. I think a lot of people watch it on YouTube, which is nice. Like that's the other thing is like YouTube, we do, if we have a guest, we put a video version on there.
Mhm.
We no longer do a video version when it's just the two of us because we are able to like we don't have a camera for that. And the sound quality kind of gets sacrificed a little when you're recording via Zoom. And if we can both record onto the same recorder, it sounds better.
The sacrifices we make, Mary, the things we do. The things we do. No, it's fine. No, it's good. But that was, you know what? Bennett Parton, he was on. He's Dr. Bennett Parton, Mary. Give him proper credit that he has.
Yeah.
He went to Georgia, and then he got his PhD, he got his master's at Clemson, his PhD at Yale,
Yeah.
just like Thurston Howell, the third, Mary. You know who he is?
Yep, he was on Gilligan's Island.
Gilligan's Island, but substantially younger than it is than Thurston Howell, no question about that. But he wrote that book, and it's actually right here. And Simon and Schuster gave us an advance copy. This
Yep.
book comes out on the 21st, which I think, Mary, I could be wrong. I think it's Tuesday, right?
Yep.
And so that comes out Tuesday. It's a really fascinating book, and like we were saying to Ben when we had him on, there is 1,000 different angles to the March to the Sea. And if for those who've listened to the episode already, this is going to be repetitive. If not, then you'll hear it again if you listen.
James said it was a very good discussion, so thank you. Yes, we definitely enjoyed having Ben on. We hope to have him on again some other time because we had a lot of fun talking with him.
Yeah,
he knows really a lot. Cool. Like
he's cool and very laid back. Like a lot of honestly, most people out of this. I mean, we haven't had too many. I don't think of anybody who's been not cool, but he's in when you think about the March to the Sea, of course, the Pavlovian responses. Fire, right? And in Hard War and Sherman and maybe Jeff C. Davis, maybe. Yep. But I think when you look at this aspect of this of the slaves following the army, and people know that's what happens, but what Ben does with this book is he really gets into the real personal stories of how the armies had to deal with this and how it led to that enhanced Port Royal experiment, right? Of the colonies, basically, for lack of a better phrase, which still exists today in that area, and because it all comes out of the March to the Sea, and it's fascinating when you really get into it. It's one of those books where you read that'll make you think, whether you're a Johnny Reb or a Billy Yank, right?
Yeah.
It makes you think about this because it's one of the many aspects of the American Civil War that you can still see today. You can still
Yeah.
see the direct impact of the March to the Sea and how it affected the freed slave population.
Yeah.
And it's really a good book, and it really is. It's very balanced. There's no question about it. I don't think Ben is a big, huge fan of Jeff C. Davis, but again,
I'm not.
I don't think most people are. I don't think his parents were the way you talk about it. But it's a good story, and it's one that I think is important to read. And then coming off of Dr. Colby's book, somehow we did back-to-back books about the subject, which is kind of strange. But his is much more on the economic side of the end of the war and how it affected the slaves versus this is the more of the personal social side. So if you get both the books together and read them, you're going to get a really good 360 view of that aspect of the war. If that fascinates you, that interests you, no question.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one that doesn't get talked about a lot. It's nice to get away from the battles. And Caleb, thank you for what he said. He said Civil War Breakfast Club gives us stories and content that is not mainstream and tells the stuff that's been lost to history. And these refugees on the march, for the most part, their stories have been lost to history. Their voices are not told. And what I like too is and Ben was really good about explaining this, but he said he has not found any direct evidence, but his his suspicions about, and we talked about this in the episode, this has been my suspicion too, is that Jefferson C. Davis, there are 3 different times that he pulls up the bridges. Not just one, not just Ebenezer Creek.
Not one, not 2,
not 3. Probably more than that. But
yeah, that was
there's no evidence, there's no direct evidence about this. But my suspicions, and we talked about this a bit with Ben, are that it might have been deliberate.
Of course it was deliberate.
It was deliberate. And because Ben made a really good point. Like Jefferson C. Davis, his line of march, there was more rivers and stuff to cross, but Oliver Otis Howard on the right wing still had to cross the bridges or still had to cross streams and stuff. Howard did not do that.
No, of course not. I mean, what you just said right there was Davis, that wing was the closest to the Savannah River.
Yeah.
And so it was a lot more marshy, right? Mm-hmm. And it had a lot more of these. And this was kind of his calling card. It was kind of like, get in the elevator quick, let the door shut for anybody gets on. That was kind of what he wanted to do. But again, Sherman's orders were such, unless you are a pioneer or you could work with the army, we didn't want you following us. And the higher you went, the more it was followed. But again, you have guys like Absalom Baird, Otis Howard, who were much more soft-handed. But then you've got people like obviously Jefferson C. Davis, who were much more literal. But he was also somebody, he was a killer who happened to join the army.
Yeah.
Right. That's who he was. And even his troops and a lot of the men who followed him hated him. Yeah. And they didn't like him. Obviously, the whole thing with that march, it just showed, and it gave him a reason to do it within the confines of orders.
Yeah.
And Sherman, again, all his druthers notwithstanding, he did not want these people following him because why? It slowed him down. Yeah. The same reason why he didn't want the Andersonville prisoners following him, because it was going to slow him down. And yes, he sent Stoneman's cavalry down to try to liberate them, and that whole thing blew up in his face because it's George Stoneman, Mary, right? Yeah. But that's the truth of it. His job was to get to Savannah as fast as possible, ASAFP, as we like to say, to meet up with the Navy, to get resupplied, to take his talons to North Carolina, punish the state of Carolina, get to Petersburg as fast as he possibly could to support Grant. And that was the plan, no question. But when you read some of these human stories and you think about it, and what Bennett's book does really, really well is he brings into the religious aspect where these people for generations were saying someday a Messiah is going to come and lead us to freedom, just like in the Old Testament with the Israelites, right? And here comes Sherman. The day of Jubilee is freeing them. So they see this as providence. And now you're trying to follow them, but now the people you thought were your liberators are trying to dump you and spin you off. Yeah. And so just from a psychological point of view, you could put yourself in the positions of these freed people seeing this day is fine. The movie Glory captures this pretty well, even though it wasn't the march. When they talk about the 54th going through Beaufort and those places, and the slaves running up to them, it's our day of jubilee. They always thought someday, someday our Savior will come and deliver us from this bondage.
Yeah.
And so you can see exactly how they would have seen it. And it's a big reason why that when these freed slaves ended up in places like Port Royal, the first thing they did was what? Set up churches.
Yep.
They set up these religious, these predominantly Black churches you see now that still exist today, comes from the idea of their day of jubilee, freedom from slavery and bondage.
Yep.
So that's and the book talks about that quite a bit. It doesn't get into religion or anything, but that aspect of it does. But it makes you think a little bit and put yourself. We always like to put yourself in the mind of the people we talk about.
And the book does that, and it's allowing these voices that have not been heard to be heard, which is what I liked about it too. It's a very human telling of the march that I think gets away from the military point of it, and you realize like, wow, there is a very like humanitarian aspect to this military thing that is going on. And again, what I like too is this kind of, I mean, I agree with Caleb, thumbs down on Jeff C. Davis, can't stand him, but this telling that, as you said, and Bennett said it too, this is like his calling card sort of thing. Oh, good morning, AQ. She's in the great state of Maine, Chamberlain country. AQ, got Chamberlain in my mug this morning.
Yeah, AQ in the house. Good to talk to her. So we'll be talking to her soon. I think we'll be having an AQ sighting here in the 717 soon.
Yes.
Unless I dreamt that. I'm pretty sure that she said she was coming down here again. So that'll be cool to hang with her, our resident Barlow experts. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, but she knows her stuff about Barlow for sure. And she's definitely, I mean, I know we're getting a little off topic, but she does some really great posts about Barlow, and she's made me like, I appreciate Barlow more than I did before. I've always liked Barlow because 11th Corps guy, but she just like learned so much from her. So she's definitely giving me more of an appreciation for Barlow.
So AQ's in Maine. Is she in Brunswick? Is that what she said she was?
No, she's in Chamberlain country. She's just over the border in Maine, I think.
Oh, so she's in northern New Hampshire then. That's what people call it. The coast. All my New England people, all my Maine friends, and my UNH friends.
Oh, Ryan's on here from the UK. He said, good afternoon, Colonials. Just finished a talk on Morgan's raid with the American Civil War Roundtable of UK.
Oh,
he has to edit their January newsletter. That's cool, Ryan.
That's a cool story right there. We did a thing on Morgan's raid.
We did
a long time ago. Yeah. Feel bad, John Hunt Morgan shot in his PJs, Mary, by a guy who flipped sides. Was a Confederate who was a guard at his wedding. Sad story, but he's of that John Mosby mold, where he'd catch you, slap you in the butt, and set you free. But he did it for game. Fascinating study. Morgan's raid and his capture, and another guy who spent time in an Ohio jail, by the way. Just saying. Okay. Yeah. But yeah, his stories are a fascinating one. So good. Glad he's doing that. And hopefully, I think that's Darren Rawlings' group, right?
Yep. I'm pretty sure Darren Rawlings is in that group too.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, she's north of New Hampshire right now, just over the border. She's in Southern
Okay, cool.
Estella said, I'm not sure if Ben talked about it, but do you think Sherman felt like he was helping the slaves feel liberated?
He said, well, as a matter of fact, he did, because the quotes he said were very specific. So after Ebenezer Creek, and so Ebenezer, I think everybody knows, but the real quick nutshell, Jefferson C. Davis, he's got a bunch of slaves following him. He's trying to dump them. He comes to Ebenezer Creek, and unlike many of the creeks that they had crossed before, this was more like a small river with a strong current up on the Savannah River. He put the pontoon boats down, pulled them up, and he left them behind at the very moment where Joseph Wheeler's 13,000-man cavalry was right on their tail. So he was basically leaving these people to be caught and be captured back to bondage. Wheeler killed 2,000 freed slaves on this march. So this was not, this was a bad situation. He pulls it up. You have stories of many of the women carrying infants being separated by the currents. The kids would drown. The women would drown. It was a real bad deal, and it hit the press like a lead balloon. Halleck and Stanton guys like William Lloyd Garrison, a lot of the people up there, Robert Gould Shaw's parents, a lot of these people, they weren't too thrilled, Mary, not one bit
Nope.
with the story. One of their men in the one of the men in the army, one of Jefferson C. Davis's men, wrote the story to the New York Times. He ratted him out, went to the newspapers. So Stanton had to come down to Savannah to deal with this. And it was a really bad political situation, obviously. But when he asked Sherman about it, he said, "What are you talking about?" He goes, they look at me as liberators. If it wasn't for me, they would not have been freed. Yeah, it's sad a lot of them died, and that's unfortunate, but a lot of them didn't, and the ones who didn't are free because of me. So he was somewhat tone deaf on that, and he never veered off of that. When Abraham Lincoln told Sherman, "Can you kind of lighten up a little bit with the slave thing?" He's like, "No, I'm not going to do it. I don't." He was not in it for the people who rip on the South, and we know there's a lot of people do that. Sherman, Jefferson C. Davis were just as bad as anybody you're going to talk about on that side. Unfortunate, it's just the way it is. But Sherman was a general who needed to get the war over in his mind. He had no tolerance for the slaves, but in a way, in a strange irony, he's the one they looked at as the great Messiah, freeing them, like we said before. But he still saw himself as somebody who freed them. He met with those 20 ministers in the greenhouse in Savannah, and he basically made a deal with them, which was really Halleck's plan to set aside the 40 acres and the mule, field order special 15. And so a lot of people look at him as somebody who gives a lot of credit for that, but he really didn't. But he did take credit, and he's somebody who, unfortunately, was somebody who did it as a military exigency, which we talked about with Ben. But at the same time, I think how he slept at night was, "I'm freeing these people. I'm freeing them from this bondage. I don't want them, but it's a byproduct of what's going on." He takes credit for 40 acres and a mule. He does.
Wasn't that partially Howard's idea too? Howard was I think Howard was like pushing for them to have land.
It was mostly Halleck's idea. It was Henry Halleck it was really his idea. And Sherman went along with it, and he gets credit for it. And Andrew Johnson takes it away afterwards. But again, he didn't stand in the way of them, but he did not go out of his way to help them. But I think how he slept at night, like I said, was he felt like he was liberating them. And he reread his memoirs. He considers himself as someone who liberated them. But and it wasn't just a black-white thing, because he sort of did the same thing to the Andersonville people. He didn't want them because it slowed them down. But it's a real yin and yang type story when you read about the march, because everybody gets lost on the burning in this and that, in Griswoldville and Milledgeville and all that, right? But the real meat and potatoes of the march is how it affected the society in Georgia, not just Savannah, but overall, and how it really overturned the apple cart with that social stratification with the slaves. Because now you have former masters going back to their plantations who are now being controlled by their former slaves, asking them for food and shelter. And so it's a real fascinating story. You read this with Colby's book together, it really gives you a good picture. But long answer to a short question was he definitely did take a victory lap, even though Ebenezer happens and his overall population. You hit that yawn very well. I got to give you credit for that. You did a real good job hiding that yawn. I'll give you props for that. Anyway,
but yeah, like, what was I going to say? I think too, like, the other thing I liked about the book was, like, yes, obviously Howard's mentioned in it, but you get an idea that, and again, there's no direct evidence for this, but I get the idea that, what happened on the march, especially with the slaves, is shaping the policies that Howard will have in the Freedmen's Bureau. That, I mean, he's an abolitionist. In an army where there's not a lot of
somebody, it's funny. Somebody said one questioned whether he was an abolitionist.
I've been questioned on that before.
No, but I think we were talking. Who the hell were we? Oh, it was Gelzo that time. And we were talking about that. He goes, I'm like, of course he was an abolitionist.
No, Gelzo said he was an abolitionist.
Right, but I think he said, like, some people question whether or not he was an abolitionist. Because I think people look at people back in the era where you could be the Frederick Douglass Garrison people,
Yeah.
or you could be the middle of the road people who probably were more neutral. But
Yeah.
Howard absolutely was. And when he got to Port Royal after the army had arrived,
Yeah.
and he started to visit these schools and see some of these places that were set up by the Gideonites, the people from Massachusetts and New York, who ironically put Mass people and New York people together, and they actually got along. I don't know how that works, but basically, Howard goes and visits the schools, and he's blown away by it. He makes Stanton come down and go visit the schools, and they're stunned by how well this whole thing is going, despite the fact you got 15,000 people there already. Because 1862 they set this colony up. Now you've got 17,000 more slaves coming in from Key Bridge from this march. Now you got 30,000 people in a community that's going to hold maybe 15,000. And so they do such a good job with these setting up the schools that Howard really ends up, that's where he really gets his chops and where he gets the Freedmen's Bureau commissioner job because of his experience in how well he kept promoting these schools in Port Royal.
Yeah, he was very much about the education and about the African Americans being able to integrate themselves into society, because he was looking at the overall bigger picture. And as AQ says, people don't always understand the different levels of abolition. And I mean, you know, the thing about, she and I were talking about this because we talk history, AQ and I do. And she was saying like how Barlow always stuck by what he believed, even if people didn't agree with him. And that's kind of how Howard was as well. And the two of them, I think they were friends. But even in the face of like, you know, Howard lost friends at West Point over his beliefs, over his being an abolitionist. He got beat up over it. And it was Robert E. Lee who came to see him in the hospital, which is ironic.
You can say whatever you want about Howard, okay, but he stuck to his guns, and you know that. And this is a guy who literally, when he was courting women at West Point, okay, his pickup line, and this is true, he would ask the girl, you know, did you think about God last night? And if they said no, he wouldn't reach back. If he said yes, he'd pursue them. That was his litmus test.
Yeah.
So say what you will about Howard. He was what he was. He was Ned Flanders, but he was from his whole life. He never changed from that. He never veered off that. Not a big alcohol guy, not a big tobacco guy.
He smoked cigars though.
No, he did. I mean, right, he did, but he wasn't like obviously like Grant to these guys. But he wasn't a guy who flip flopped. You knew where you stood with him.
Yeah.
And so, and we said before, when him along with Slocum came west in the summer of '63. And then it ultimately ended up being on that corps commander in charge of the Army of the Tennessee. He was that adult in the room on the march. And when you look at the people he had, though he had other ones, we had Slocum, he had guys like Baird with them. So it wasn't like he had the land of the misfit toys here either.
But if something was to happen to Sherman on the march, Howard was the second in command. That's how much Sherman trusted him. Even though Slocum outranked him, but Slocum didn't get caught up in rank. But I can't remember where it was I read that. I found that out recently that Howard was the one to take over if something had happened to Sherman.
And about Howard and Barlow, both have Plymouth Mass connections.
Yep, AQ was just saying they're second cousins too. So that's pretty cool. And I think like, you know, Sherman had a lot of trust for Howard that Howard did not have as being a part of the AOP, you know, for one, you know, Ryan brings up the fact that Howard didn't drink, you know, and people didn't like him because of that.
No, but I mean, again, you can see who he was a polarizing guy, Howard was. And here we go with the Howard thing again, right? But I mean, yeah, he was a guy who obviously was not on the Christmas card list of a lot of people. One Joseph Hooker comes to mind, who called him who said he was more likely to wear a petticoat than a blue coat, basically calling him a woman.
Yeah.
In that, so that you can see when you take this army, this volunteer army, and I know a lot of these guys were West Points, but you throw them all in this big pot with all these different where they're coming from and different theories and philosophies and just attitudes towards life. You're not going to find more different people than the Army of the Potomac at Gettysburg here. When you're looking at a Sickles versus a Howard, I mean, it's night and day. And nothing against Sickles, but he was just a a New Yorker versus
Yeah.
a New Englander. He was a politician, unlike Howard. He was not a West Pointer like Howard was. But they were both brilliant academically as far as IQ goes. But at the end of the day, you're having to deal with these different types of people, and how hard it must have been for a commanding general to deal with this. And the reason why I say all this is you go back to the March again. Now you're Sherman, and now you've got these different levels of generals under you conducting this march who you're gambling everything on.
Yeah.
Because you're Sherman, you called in every chip possible to get Grant and Lincoln to do this.
Yeah.
So if this thing screwed up, and that's why Ebenezer was such a big deal,
Yeah.
because they said, there was no orders from Lincoln, behave yourself or anything like that. They know it was total war, but at the end of the day, when those New York Times published that article about what Jefferson C. Davis did, you can only imagine. I mean, and they said Lincoln didn't swear, but I bet he swore that day. He swore.
Definitely.
Of course, he swore.
He swore.
People do.
Yeah. And I think and Grant says it's amazing how Sherman was able to rehabilitate the Army of the Potomac, kind of like rejects. I wouldn't call them that, but like Howard and Slocum, that they're able to kind of go out there and shine. But I think it was just they needed the change of scenery. I think there's egos everywhere. Okay, these guys all have egos on them, but I think there was more ego in the AOP than Army of the Tennessee, or like out west. There's still ego out there, don't get me wrong on that. But I think, and Sherman had a way of recognizing talents in people, and he knew the reputation of both men coming out there, especially Howard's, and he reassured Howard in a letter that, he said, don't worry, I know your reputation, but I know you're a great soldier. You have a good reputation out here. And that's the thing, is like Howard did have a good reputation. He had a reputation of being very stoic in battle. I suspect, and I've come to think about this recently, is I suspect that there was a bit of a rivalry between not rivalry. I don't think Howard and Hancock liked each other that
much. I don't know. I think they're just different personalities. I mean, maybe who knows? But to be honest, I don't think a lot of people liked Hancock anyway. I mean, my own personality, just because but only because I think he was clearly a hothead. He lost it regular. We talked about many of the stories. Eliakim Sherrill is the one that comes to mind, where and he was almost like the Stonewall without the religion. He liked to give timeouts. That's what he was. And all the other thing about Hancock was he was not the most humble guy. Right?
No.
he never put the blame on him. Even in Ream Station, he didn't put the blame on him.
No.
Right? So who knows? But he's not. This is not a rip on Hancock. A lot of them are like that.
Yeah.
But most of these people. I mean, you could say the same thing, obviously, about Sheridan. You could say the same thing about a lot of these people. They just didn't want to take the blame for it.
Yeah, AQ agrees. There's certainly a lot of ego in the AOP, especially with Hancock. Caleb said that the Army of the Potomac was like Housewives of Dubai. Like there's more drama, which is, I mean, they're still like an amazing army, and I love to study them, but I find the West is just, there's like,
you gotta look, he's right, but you gotta look at when you're talking about it though.
Yeah.
The Army of the Potomac, I mean, the Army of the Potomac of 1862 Antietam is a lot different than the one in 1863 at Gettysburg, right? It just is. I mean, you have more battle tested generals, because by the time you look at Antietam, some of the people you have in that army, guys like Edward Sumner, right? People along those lines with that, who just don't either probably should not have been in that position, or should have been in a situation where they were, Franklin comes to people like that. And so they were replaced by people who were more battle tested and better. What I'm trying to say is, in my opinion, the Gettysburg AOP is better than the Antietam AOP. And it's nothing to do with McClellan versus Meade. It has to do specifically with the people in charge. You have a lot of the old guards. Edward Sumner, one that comes to mind. Franklin comes to mind. People like that are the ones who really stick it. And you see these younger people coming along, guys like Sedgwick, who really doesn't have the greatest day at Antietam.
No.
but he ends up being a corps commander at Gettysburg. We've said before, not one corps commander at Gettysburg held that position at Antietam.
No.
Now you got a lot of people: Sedgwick, Doubleday, Howard, Hancock. Hancock jumped. He went from being a brigade commander to on the Sixth Corps, jumping all the way to a division commander in the Second Corps when Israel Richardson goes down. So it was almost like that pyramid going up a little bit with it, where you got better and better as it went on. But you had some bad generals later too. But I think if you took those 7 corps in Gettysburg and put them into the 6 corps in Antietam, it might have been a different story too.
Bryant said Horatio Wright was an underrated general.
Horatio Weiss, there's a lot of people like that that you can talk about too. William French. I mean, he's the one. I mean, go about Antietam again, but this is his situation is what he's part of that Second Corps that gets all screwed up, and we've talked about how McClellan doesn't send them all at the same time. It all gets screwed up in that regard. But again, you have you have a guy like him. You have a guy like him who basically is put in a bad situation. It's not really his fault. And there's a brigade commander named Max Weber, who was part of, popped because mentioned Wright, maybe think of French, who they're when you think about the sunken road of Antietam, you think about the Irish Brigade, you think about that, but that was the second wave. Yeah. The first wave of these poor dudes who had to hit the sunken road, this is French's guys, and there's a great story. A great story about the 5th Maryland. The 5th Maryland was commanded by a guy Leopold Bromberg or something like that, some random guy. But it doesn't matter. But what's great about this story is they're relatively new troops. Their flag bearer, 6 feet tall, 300 pounds.
Jesus,
I mean that's reenactor size back in the actual battle. And he's leading his 5th Maryland with the flag, and he's so big and he's so slow that the troops go around him like a crescent moon.
Oh my God!
And so when they hit the sunken road, it's a U, and he's in the back. He's trying to carry this flag, but you know what happens? They all get slaughtered, but he doesn't. He's 50 yards from the sunken road, waving the flag. This 300-pound dude, and he never gets hit. And he falls back. It's just one of those stupid stories, but it's kind of cool when you think about Antietam again. But that's kind of how these stories went. But you had a lot of people like that. And you had a lot of generals who got their chops at battles like that, who rose up, who saw later on. And we saw especially when you get to the Overland campaign.
Yeah. Showing some comments here. So Grant says that Grant tried to help Franklin get another job when he took over in charge of the armies, but the administration wouldn't have it. Ryan makes mention that it doesn't help Hancock that he sticks to the Democrat Party. Bill Etzkorn says AOP being so close to Washington meant there was more that's why there was more egos, and the chance of having your military career ruined was exasperated by the politics. That's absolutely true.
Well, politics is everything. We've talked about that a million times. If you're going to study, if you're going to study these battles, you better know the politics, because you know exactly what that's all about on both sides.
Yeah, Richard McGovern says Hancock arrives at Gettysburg, as we know, with the orders to take command, and he finds Howard as a senior officer with his rep from Chancellorsville disputing. He didn't really dispute. Howard didn't dispute it. He was kind of like, I think he got caught off guard, not defending Howard in that, but there wasn't the fight on East Cemetery Hill that people say there is. That's not why the statues were facing away from each other. Yeah. But Richard said there's got to be a rivalry after that. I think it was there before, and I think it's like, it's not one of those big ones. It's not like Grant and Sheridan. I think it's to do with the politics as well. Hancock is a Democrat. I know that Gibbon does not like Howard. And a lot of this goes back to the politics and the abolition as well. Yeah. That's one reason why Doubleday was not well liked, was because he was also an abolitionist. But that being an abolitionist factored into how some people felt towards you, especially in the AOP. And it's just, again, going back to this, like the Western Theater with the march, Sherman is no abolitionist at all. But he and Howard become very good friends during that time, which is interesting. He and Howard and Slocum continued to be friends after the war. They often went to the opera together when the three of them lived in New York City. And what's interesting about that is Sherman always insisted that Howard sat on his right and Slocum on his left.
Mm-hmm.
And the three of them, like, you don't go on the march and not come away being bonded in a certain way. And I think the three of them remained very good friends after that. They planned, it was Slocum and Howard who planned Sherman's funeral.
Yeah.
Howard or Sherman had pictures of Thomas and Slocum and Howard hanging in his room. And there's a story that Howard told that he went over there one day and Sherman said, "You were all going to be on this wall long after I am gone." He wanted the pictures to remain up. And I think those were the three people that he was closest with after the war. And he was close to, and he and Joseph E. Johnston were very good friends too. And they didn't know each other before the war or during it. Like the first time they met in person was at Bentonville. And something, I think that whole thing, how Sherman treated him was what, formed the friendship, that Sherman came in there and was very respectful to Johnston. And said, these are my terms, No,
there's no doubt about it. I mean, that's cool about studying this stuff, is you can get some good ideas about how a lot of these things kind of made sense and how it all kind of did its own thing. But but there's a lot of people. I mean, people, if you mentioned French a bit ago, he's a guy that's kind of stays under the radar historically. Yeah. I mean, he was at all the big battles: Fredericksburg, Antietam, Gettysburg. He survived the war. I think he lived like 1890 or so. He lived for a while.
Yeah.
Brian
mentions that he lives on Harris Ridge here in Gettysburg. The first shot markers is within spitting distance.
Oh, good old Knoxland. That's a nice area over there. I've been there in a while, actually.
Caleb asked, said we might know more about this. Was there a difference in Washington among Lincoln and his team on their treatment thoughts on the Army of the Potomac versus the Western armies? I think they had a more hands-off approach with the Western armies, a little bit more than the AOP. Again, that's to do with like geography.
I think they felt I think the Grant aspect, I think, was a big part of it too, yes, especially later in the war, because Halleck was out there commanding the armies right up to until Henry and Donelson. So I think my guess is that Lincoln didn't have to worry about them as much, and out of sight, out of mind. But also the news wasn't as fast. Everything that happened in the East was right on their doorstep of Washington. And obviously they had to protect Washington. You have to, that's the best thing about Grant, is you can be offensive or defensive without having to worry about protecting Washington.
Yeah.
You can gobble away and come down at Vicksburg, and you can come down and work your way that way. Versus here, you were always under the specter of, no matter what you do, protect Baltimore and protect Washington. And I think that was the big thing. And that's a lot of pressure on guys. And we saw it with McClellan, we saw it on Meade. Meade's greatest victory was here in Gettysburg, and and Lincoln still wrote that letter, never sent it, but he still sent the letter, basically how he had him in his hands and it slipped through his fingers. Well, you're welcome, Mr. President. Thanks so much. 3 days for the battle, I take over and I get the biggest battle in the East, and but that goes to show the politics was always hanging around.
And I think I've told this story before in here, but I suspect, I don't have proof of this, but I suspect that the reason why Lincoln did not send that letter to Meade was because he got a letter. It was basically a come to Jesus chat from Howard, that Howard wrote him and was like, and the letter was off the record. That's what Howard and Lincoln had agreed to. Mm-hmm. So he said, Howard was basically like, and I'm paraphrasing here, he's like, you need to slow your roll with blaming Meade, and you need to tell the press to stop, and you need to make a statement that is, and Howard just went on, he's like, this is the condition of the Army right now. We are broken. We have wounded commanders. We're trying to pick up the pieces, and we are pursuing as best we can. And he was basically like, this is like, you need to slow your roll on this. And he basically says, stop. This is you are not, and he tells him, he's like, you need to understand, you don't understand the situation that we are in right now. And I think that letter might have made Lincoln have a oh shit moment with like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't send this, maybe. And it was, I think it was after that, that Lincoln kind of had the whole like, maybe I need to be a little bit more hands off and trust these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a situation. You know how you're at work sometimes, and you get all fired up at your job, and you go to type that email, that "F you Charlie" letter, and then you don't. You decide not to send it. That's kind of how it was. But again,
I think so. But I think I think I'll have to find the letter that he wrote to Lincoln,
but it's
because it was
also
really,
it's also frustrating because if you're Lincoln, though, in your mind anyway, you see Lee escape Sharpsburg, right?
yeah,
And now you see this repeat itself again. But again, I think the reason why you said he didn't send it, that Howard's notwithstanding, was you're coming off of Second Manassas,
yeah,
right? You're coming off of a lot of the 7 days, and so you finally are able to push him back, and I think he probably realized that.
yeah.
I think he did realize too. Unfortunately, but didn't. I mean, the real opportunity to bag Lee, I mean, Gettysburg was one of them, but Spotsylvania was they had him dead, and he got away, and that was Grant, right? And then of course Antietam, where he literally, and this, we've said many times, we've waxed poetic a little bit about McClellan, and some people think we're apologists for him, but I think
Brian just said he has no patience for any defense of McClellan, but I like him.
You gotta call balls and strikes with him though, because like anything else, when you look at he missed Antietam. The plan was hit the flanks, wait for the breakthrough at the middle, and go through. And he had it, and he didn't go through, and that's unacceptable. You cannot, even in real time, you cannot find excuses for him. But I think what happens is when you look at the post Antietam, the perception is he sat there and did nothing and all that stuff. I mean, Antietam was one of 4 battles in the Maryland campaign. And people forget about Shepherdstown. And he did push them off, and there was an opportunity. But again, you're still going with bad numbers you're getting from people like Pinkerton, people like Curtin in Pennsylvania. And again, when you hold back Fitzjohn Porter and you hold back the Sixth Corps finally does come in, but you had an opportunity right at that breakthrough, right at the sunken road. You had them dead to rights.
And that is a mistake on McClellan's
right.
part.
And AP Hill is still down in Harper's Ferry, still dealing with the escape, the capture of Harper's Ferry. And so, yes, if you're a McClellan person, you can't defend that. And even people like Tom Clemens, the people who really, really are really on the pro McClellan side versus the anti, there's none.
No.
Because going back to French again, you had 3 brigades. You got Nathan Kimball, Dwight Morris, and the aforementioned Max Weber. Now, no one knows who the hell both those people are, but people know who Nathan Kimball is. We talked about him at Kernstown, and he has a pretty battle-tested group in the 8th Ohio who fought over here, right? You get slaughtered. And so when Israel Richardson's, the other division comes in, you've got the breakthrough done. You had it. You send the orders late to Ambrose Burnside. He's supposed to attack. I mean, I think the perception of Antietam was there was the Westwoods, and then it spilled down the sunken road, and it spilled down to Rosback Bridge, which is Burnside Bridge. But no, it's all supposed to take place at the same time. And there's McClellan back at the Pry House looking through his glasses with the 5th Corps commander, and they can't see the battlefield, so they don't know. So he doesn't want to send them in, and that's the mistake he has, and you without a doubt. But again, he did chase him down, and he did when you went over when you went into Shepherdstown, and he was able to block the Williamsport Bridge later. So it's a half glass full situation, no doubt about it. But the army was pretty strong at the gaps, South Mountain, pretty strong at Shepherdstown. But again, the opportunity was there. And I think that was in Lincoln's mind after Gettysburg. Was so close, but no cigar. But Meade was more aggressive than I think people give him credit for.
Yeah. I just want to give a shout out to Bjorn. He's on here from Abraham Lincoln Bookshop.
Oh, cool.
And he says that you can buy the book from them. You can pre-order, you can order a first edition of Somewhere Toward Freedom, and it's signed on our custom book plate. So that's cool. And Estella was just asking if you can order online. You can. And I'm gonna give a shout out to independent bookstores like what Bjorn has. Support them because they need the support over Amazon.
Yeah, and speaking of Ben, he will be a week from Monday, a week from tomorrow. He'll be in Harrisburg,
Yep,
at the National Civil War Museum, and
yep.
he'll be doing a book chat at 5 p.m. So if you happen to be, I don't know if they're doing that online or not. I have no idea if they are, to be honest. But I know if you're on the area and you want to buy a copy of the book that day, I'm sure they're going to have them.
Yeah,
and you want to get it signed by Bennett.
You can get it there too, but you can, in the meantime, you can order it also off Abraham Lincoln Bookshop too.
But one tip though, if you talk to Bennett, he's a Georgia graduate. Don't bring up the Notre Dame game. Not a fan of that. But no, if you're in the area, go check it out. We're gonna go. I'm pretty sure we're gonna go. We'll head up for that. So that'll be a good time.
Yeah, Estella, definitely get it from, if you're going to get the book, get it from Bjorn because you're going to get it signed. You're supporting a great bookstore. Caleb's actually going to see Bjorn sometime when he's in Chicago.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's a great place. We've talked about it many times. When we get back to Chicago, I mean, we'll get you up there. It just Bjorn's a good guy. He's obviously, it's a great place. It's more of a museum or a consignment shop than a bookshop. When you go there, you'll see.
Yep. Weber has a great waxed mustache. He fought with Siegel in Germany in 1848, a Duchy of Baden, regular soldier. The rebels got beaten by the loyalists.
Max Weber, yeah. You know what's a good story? You mentioned we mentioned Nathan Kimball a bit ago, and he was part of the 8th Ohio. He had that 132nd Pennsylvania, green as a shamrock, had never even fired a musket before. And they're commanded by Richard Oakford. He was a colonel, and they're off. And there's that story that they're over waiting for them to go into battle, and in the farm that they were hanging out at, waiting to go into battle, the farmer had he made honey, collected honey. He had a whole bunch of beehives with bees flying around, and they're all waiting. And they're all nervous. They're all trying to get into battle, trying to get in the game face, or see battle for the first time, see the elephant for the first time. And what happens is a southern shell hits the damn beehives, and bees fly all over the place. And Kimball watching these guys, these troops, literally running from bees and just shaking his head, and before they go into battle. It's one of those fun stories. The 132nd, if you get into, it's just one of those. Got me think about Kimball.
Bees, you hate bees.
I mean, there's a whole bunch of them, and it's actually a famous story. That there's a picture. I think Gary put on his page not too long ago, where you can see it's the roulette farm, and if you go and you look, you can see the farm with all the beehives for the battle.
Oh wow!
It was like a whole, like I collected bees or made honey, but there was a whole bunch, and you can only imagine you're all set to fight, and now there's 100 bees angry flying around because it get hit 1 in a million shot, got hit by a shell. Just one of those fun little stories.
Just want to say that Bjorn is going to be interviewing Ben on February 6th. It will be on Facebook Live.
Oh, cool.
So that's really cool. Yeah, they do great things at Abraham Lincoln Bookshop. Lots of Facebook Lives with authors and all that. So definitely be sure to check that out. And he is at, as you said, the National Civil War Museum on February 27th as well. Let's see what else. Oh, James asked if we're doing the Antietam Institute in April.
Probably. I imagine so. I got to go down there February 15th. But yeah, I'm sure we will. I'm not sure if Olivia Black runs that too or not. But if she,
I think she does.
Yeah. So we'll yeah, I'm sure we will. I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll look into that definitely. Yeah. Bryant mentions the Meade conducted, as you said, a good pursuit against Lee, considering he had no sizable reserves and very little provisions, and he won Rappahannock and Bristol stations.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due, but I think it's just sometimes you're guilty of your predecessors, right? If you're sitting there going, if you're a football coach and you fire the guy and you got a new guy in, he does the same stupid thing the previous guy did in your mind, you can go, here we go again.
Yeah.
But I think it's a lot of it is sometimes you got to take a step back, catch your breath a little bit, maybe have a little bit of whiskey or something there, right? And then catch yourself and see what the big picture was. I think he did.
Barb was wondering, how did the saying "see the elephant" come about? I'm not sure.
No, it's just one of those phrases that you see the elephant for the first time. I know that phrase has been seen in First Manassas, so it must go way back. That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but that's it's been around even the earliest letters.
Yeah,
maybe it goes back to like all the way
I
back
wonder
in
if
the
it might
day.
go back to Alexander the Great because he
That
fought
probably, you know what,
elephants.
it probably does. I bet you I would not be surprised if that's where it came from. You know, if you see the elephants, you know, you're being attacked.
Yeah.
That's probably where it
Well,
comes from.
he was attacked by elephants. I think that's where Bucephalus's horse got killed. I know with
Bucephalus. Good, good Bucephalus talk on a Saturday morning, Mary.
I in a previous life, shouldn't say previous life, but I have given a talk on Alexander the Great at a conference before. So I did a independent
Yeah.
study on him.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. Hey, remember that time I got stung by those bees and you thought it was a joke and you thought it was
yeah.
funny? Speaking of bees.
Oh,
Yeah.
and Lou mentions Hannibal too. Hannibal had
Yeah.
elephants as well. Oh, James says it was from Rome.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense. I mean, um, think of how these etymology and these words all come from. So that makes total sense, you know.
Ryan was wondering, does Kimball ever get beyond division command?
I don't think he does. I mean, Nathan Kimball, for the most part, he no, he doesn't. He's a brigadier. I know he gets breveted as a major
Mhm.
general later, but no, I think that's as high as he got. You know, he went west too, Mary.
Yeah.
I mean, he ended up out fighting at Franklin, fighting in Nashville, in places like that. But no, I don't believe he ever did because he was. I know he was a brigadier. He was a good brigadier. He's the only
Yeah.
one who beat Lee and Jackson in two separate battles with Cheat Mountain and Kernstown. But no, he stuck around. I know he got a brevet, but I don't think he ever actually got the I don't think he ever got the second star.
No,
I'll have to
which
look
is
into that though, but I don't believe he ever did.
yeah.
You know,
Another question from Ryan: who's the most anonymous Corps commander you can think of?
a non.
Like kind of like nondescript, doesn't. I would say Slocum.
Well, what are we talking? Are we talking Gettysburg? Are we talking?
All overall war, I think.
I don't know. I mean, the thing about it though is you can look. It depends on how obscure battles. But if you're talking Gettysburg, probably Slocum, even though he was the
Yeah.
most highest rank one. If you think about it, I mean, you can look specifically at you know, you could look at things like Antietam, for example, and you can look at all these different guys. Edwin Sumner, we talked about.
Bjorn says John
Franklin.
Park.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of them. But there's a lot of, and sometimes that means they're doing a good job. It just means
Mhm.
they do their job
Yeah.
without any sort of any sort of whatever. A lot of these dudes are really into themselves, certainly. Um, but yeah, you
Yeah.
know,
Richard said
Darius
Slocum or
Couch is one.
Sedgwick.
Yeah, Darius Couch is one. Second Corps after Chancellorsville, but he ended up coming back to Pennsylvania, Department of the Susquehanna, right?
Some of the ones in the West, I
Yeah, I
think.
mean, there's a whole bunch of them. I mean, in the Western the Confederacy, you tend to have more. You had less corps, obviously, so
Yeah.
some of the names really stand out. Um, I mean, even Richard Ewell was probably nondescript in his time.
Yeah. I think some of the ones in the West. I was going to say Blackjack, but I think he was pretty well known.
Yeah.
Logan. Dan Butterfield never commanded a corps, did he?
No,
He's okay with us.
he was a chief of staff there for a while.
Oh, Preston Blair.
Preston Blair was a good one.
Yeah,
He's a
that's
good
one for
attacker.
LC. That's a good one. James the Rosewoods Clown.
Rosewood's Clown was one. If you put him in charge, he's probably cleared out the G.T. Anderson's troops and Sem's guys. You know, Sem's was killed by the loop over here. I don't know who shot him. Might have been the Clown.
Ayers or Alpheus Williams.
I mean, that's the thing is there are so many random names. It's just
You know who William Emery is?
William Emery. He's another one. He's there's people like that, but there are a lot of people who probably should have been who never were.
Yep.
And we talk about specifically on the Confederate side, right?
Claiborne was never corps.
Clayborough is the one that really comes to mind.
Yeah.
You know?
Hiram Granberry.
How about a little Albion Howe, Sixth Corps? He never made it beyond division. A lot of good ones, you know.
AQ said Barlow commanded the Second Corps briefly in May of '65.
Yeah, Barlow. Barlow's a guy who was most of all the big battles too.
Yep. I like him. He's like, and as I said, I like him more because of AQ. She just like the way she studies and talks about him is very much makes you want to learn more about him and makes you like him. Whereas, I find that when some people study an individual, it makes me like not like them anymore at all.
No, and that's what happens is you find some of these people and you like them or you don't. And that's the problem with this is you end up you and a lot of it falls back on what other people think. I mean, we know people who don't like people because they like certain people.
Yes.
Right.
Which is weird.
And that's one of those strange things here, which just kind of makes no sense at all. But that's part of studying history, right?
James, did Tolliver ever, is it?
I don't know. That's a good question. If Tolliver did. People who pronounce his name correctly are impressive, though.
Tolliver?
No.
Taliaferro?
Taliaferro?
Ryan should have been, but never were. Carney was never a corps commander.
No, well,
Carney should have ran the army.
Carney was on his way, though.
I think Carney would have been commanding the AOP at a certain point.
No, and so that's the sad part about it was these people unfortunately they were struck down in their prime too. Speaking of guys like Stevens, same battle.
Hazard Stevens, yeah.
You know.
Jim mentions that Richard Ewell is buried in the same cemetery in Nashville as Bushrod.
Yeah.
What a name, Bushrod Johnson.
Now Bushrod John, I mean, but you know what though? He's another tough one. And but you saw we were talking about politics. The politics in the South was just as bad.
Oh,
it really, really was.
Shot Pouch Walker comes to mind.
Shot Pouch Walker.
Remember, he was like, after the meeting that Claiborne was like, let's emancipate everybody, or he presented his emancipation, and they were like, nope, we're not doing that. So Shot Pouch Walker's in there in that meeting, and he and his mother were like big time slave owners, and he was like, the F you're gonna do this. And he goes to Claiborne after, and he's basically like, I'm going to send your thing to Richmond and get you in trouble. You're going to be gone from the army. And Claiborne basically hands him the thing, is like, do it, send it. I want them to see it. And then it gets sent, and Davis is like, nope, let's hide this in the filing cabinet. It was not found until years later when someone was cleaning out.
Well, I mean, right, but I mean, he wasn't the only. I mean, don't forget, Hunter on the northern side did his own Emancipation Proclamation too, and he got shot down hard by Lincoln too for it. This is the same David Hunter who failed hard in the Valley, the Field of Lost Shoes, right? Breckinridge.
Yep.
But he tried that too on the northern side. And they said, Lincoln said, no, we ain't doing that. So it was on both sides. But I don't think Hunter was ever blackballed for it. I mean, he did get the position, the Army of the Valley. He just couldn't replace Sigel and didn't do much better. And then until Sheridan came along. But that was tried in the north too.
Yeah. Jim Miller said Zollicoffer is buried in the same cemetery as well. That's another big loss.
Felix Zollicoffer. Yeah. I mean, that's about, like, again, that's a general who people talk about Albert Sidney Johnson, but Zollicoffer was a huge loss.
Yeah.
I
had someone say that I've since left the website. I've since left the group because they turned out to be quite toxic. Someone said Zollicoffer was murdered in cold blood during a battle.
What group are you talking about?
Oh, you know the group I'm talking about. The Facebook group I left, like.
Oh, on Facebook. I thought you meant like some like group, like.
No.
Hang out in groups anytime.
No.
Yeah, well, Facebook. I mean, God's sakes. I mean, just that whole thing. I mean,
Anyway, this person who also, the reason I left the group was because this person wrote a very unfair, scathing piece about Howard, and I came back at him.
Yep, I know who you're talking about.
Yep, and the person said, I demand to see your sources. And I showed him my source, which was the middle finger, and left the group. I was quite proud of myself for that.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunately that falls on people. So the good thing about history is that it's subjective, and there's no right or wrong. It really isn't. It's how you interpret it. But there are people who don't feel that way. There are people who think that they know it all.
This guy was adamant that Howard was the worst thing to ever happen to the Army of the Potomac, and I was like, okay, like, I acknowledge he made mistakes, but like, let's not, grant new insulting Howard be the final straw. It was slowly building. But yeah, like saying that Zollicoffer was murdered in cold blood. And I was like, can you please tell me how it's cold blood when he wandered into like the lines? And he was like, because the guy knew him. And I'm like,
well, like George Carlin once said, Mary, somewhere in the world is the worst doctor to live, and somebody has an appointment with him tomorrow. Yeah. It's one of those things. People don't people don't know as much as they think they do, but they think they do, and there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, there are things that you agree with that, and I don't, vice versa. Everybody else doesn't mean you're rich. Just how you interpret it. But to say it's anytime I tell you one thing though, anytime you start using superlatives, this person was the best, this person was the worst. When you talk about history, you're probably wrong, because it's something you can look at any of these people and you can focus on their worst and you can focus on their best. Doesn't mean they are the best or they are the worst, but that's the problem, you know. You look at Mill Springs, for example, Zollicoffer going down. This is a guy who had glasses, he couldn't see. He was blind, kind of like you with your glasses.
I'm blind without my glasses, pretty much.
He stumbled into the Union lines wearing a white raincoat, and he was shot. Murdered in cold blood? No. Does that mean every single general was killed? Does that mean Kearny was murdered in cold blood? Does it mean Stevens was killed in cold blood? No, it's war, unfortunately.
Well, this person, their reasoning behind it was the fact that the guy who shot him apparently knew him and was out to get him. And I was like,
that's somebody that, I mean, again, you know what, to each their own. That's what he thinks, knock himself out. But I just think I think it's unfortunate that people do that. But I think a lot of times you see this a lot with Rosecrans Grant, right? Where if you sit there and say, Rosecrans is the man, tell all this telehome, all this stuff, somebody's going to take that as an affront to Grant, and they're going to hit you on it. And that's the problem with social media. Is that this lack of accountability, and I get it. That's the whole point of it. But at the end of the day, that's going to come out all the time. But people have their favorites. People have their binkies. That's why I hate everybody. I have no binkies, Mary.
Yes, Cisco. Yes, let's wear something that really stands out on the battlefield.
Well, look at Joseph Hooker in Antietam. He rides a bright white horse. He's down there in the West Woods, or in that area where the Dunker Church is, riding along a white horse. He gets shot and hits his foot. He's lucky for him, he doesn't get killed. But sometimes you got to use your head a little bit. Get off the damn horse. That's probably what happened to Garnett at Gettysburg. He was on the horse. He was a target.
And parts of him are still here, and parts of him are in Richmond, though that has been disputed by people.
Yeah, I don't know, but I mean, if you think of just people in your own lives who study this, and everybody knows somebody who holds on to one general, and never lets it go, and that's fine. But you got to be objective about it. That's what you said before. McClellan's is the most polarizing one of all, the Union side. But even that, you can find positives he did. Say in the South as well. Every one of them. You could take a perceived area clown like Braxton Bragg, right? Well, but I'm saying that's the perception.
Jelly bones,
right? But he did a lot of good things with that army. I mean, he got stuck in the political game we talk about, and so there are people who like, and there are people who dislike everybody, but it's always one of those, I like this person, I'm better, I'm smarter, right? And that's why I try to be objective. I don't have a favorite general, Mary. I don't, for that reason, because I don't care.
I do.
I know. Oh, do you? I was not aware.
So Frank's on here. Good morning. He said, happy 210th birthday to James Chestnut, Mary Chestnut's husband, and 194th to General Ferrero. Yeah.
Yeah, he was the one who gave the whiskey back, the 51s at Burnside Bridge.
Oh, cool. Yeah, Frank, he's a guy who knows his Civil War history too.
Frank, and he's out in LA. Hopefully things are going well. I mean, it's a tough situation out there in California. But I guess that's the scoop with that. But no, about a lot of these people, Ferrero. I mean, imagine that. We'll take that bridge if you give us our whiskey rations back. Will you do that? Yes, I will. And they take the damn bridge. Everything goes back. Everything goes back to whiskey. You notice that,
Frank? But who genuinely likes Bragg?
Well, I mean that's. I mean, he's the polarizing one. On the, although Longstreet is for a lot of elite people, certainly.
Oh yeah. And there's people that they don't like Joseph E. Johnston, which I'm like, okay, but I like him. I think he was a great commander. Like,
he's just a different type of commander. He's not. I mean, he was not aggressive, but he was somebody who I think had a good idea of what they needed to do. I think he understood the Atlanta campaign pretty well. He knew he couldn't hold Sherman back, but he could try to contain him and slow the game down. it's no surprise that as soon as he got the old heave ho, and then Hardy left, and they brought in Hood.
Yeah.
That things went from the frying pan to the fire for the Army of Tennessee, right? And
Mhm.
what does Sherman do? He does what he's going to do anyway.
Yeah.
Which again goes back to the March to the Sea, right? The book.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's just read some comments. Farrell did well at Knoxville.
Yeah. Yeah. But Joseph E. Johnson, he's somebody who, you know, for the most part, I think he played the cards that was dealt him.
Yeah.
He was, you know, he was right there from the beginning at Fort Sumter, was there right to Bentonville.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really have too many really, really, really bad moments like a lot of them do. But he's a steady Eddie.
Yeah.
He's vanilla. He's not gonna fire you up one way or the other. Which is what drove guys like Jefferson Davis crazy.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, because he wanted someone, an aggressive type who was going to try to deal with somebody in the West like a Grant. And he wasn't that guy.
No, agreed.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Anaconda plans coming up. Johnson was level-headed and didn't have fantasies about what he could do.
Yeah, I mean that's who he was. I mean he was, that's who he was. He was kind of like dollar store George Thomas. If you think about it, he kind of was.
Yeah.
Well, he was. I think he had a good concept. He was steady, was not risky, did not take too many chances. But his job was to sustain the army. He gave up land slowly. He didn't fall back into Atlanta, but he fought him hard. I mean, you got to get. I mean, his army did pretty well at places like Pickett's Mill, Resaca.
Yep.
Right.
Agreed. Yep.
Ringgold. I know a lot of it was Clayburn, but it's still that's.
Yep.
It is what it is. You're fighting an army bigger than yours.
Yep.
And you got to do your cast. I mean, it wasn't like they were dealt a perfect hand either after Chattanooga.
Exactly. Yep. Enter Hood.
Yeah, and even Hood though, he had his moments. But again, he was who he was. He was not going to veer from that aggressive style. And people say he wasn't the same after his injury here at Gettysburg at the Bushman farm here. But again, he was still aggressive. But I think he was smart. I think he wanted to be aggressive, but especially when he got to the Atlanta campaign, he wanted to be aggressive, but wanted to stay in the back.
Yeah.
He wanted to be like McClellan in that regard. He wasn't going to be like Hooker. He wasn't going to be like Longstreet, who was always, or Beauregard, who was always at the front of the line. You know?
Good question here from LC. If you had to serve under a commander, North or South, who would you pick? Lou said Lew Wallace.
Yeah,
I'm going to think about this one. If I could serve under a commander, the South, Hiram Granberry.
Really?
Yep, Hiram Granberry.
Okay. I don't know who that. I mean, it depends if you wanted to survive or not, or if you wanted to be out one of these guys who was aggressive. You know.
And in the North, Carl Schurz.
That's random. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know who I would be.
I didn't go for like the corps command. I mean, I guess if I had to pick a corps commander, in the South, I would probably in the South, Hardy.
You're talking corps commanders?
Corps commander now. Yeah. And in the North, for corps commander, Thomas.
I'd probably go Hooker, just because he's a mass guy. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Caleb said Lee. That's a great question. Like, but yeah, if I lower down, like, I'm going Hiram Granberry on the South. I'm going with the Texans, which, by the way, go Texans tonight.
Oh, that game's tonight, isn't it?
Never let it be said that.
No, it's not this afternoon. They're going to get smoked today, though. But whatever.
Richard said, "I'd fight Mitt Siegel." Siegel.
So that's. I mean, I don't know. It's a tough question. It's the same question. It's the same who would you drink with question. If you really think about it. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to be under a guy who was competent.
Yep.
I'd like to be a guy who didn't recklessly expose himself, right? Literally and figuratively. So I don't know. I don't know how to be. I mean, that's a good question, though. Maybe like a Sedgwick, maybe.
Right.
You know?
Caleb said in the North, probably Sherman.
Yeah, well, Sherman. It depends because Sherman. The problem with Sherman was if he did decide to attack frontally, you're probably going to get smoked because that's just the way he was. Sherman was not a was not the best fighter. You could look at Chattanooga. You could look, obviously, Kennesaw. When he wanted to fight you and hit you, he threw you to the meat grinder. So if you're trying to save your own skin, I don't know. I don't know. It's a good question.
And James said Osterhaus.
Osterhaus would be a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Oosterhouse.
Oosterhouse.
Right?
Yeah, is it Oster or Ooster?
I've always pronounced it Oosterhouse. But it says Osterhaus, but I know people call it Oosterhouse.
I mean, I guess like obviously, yes, Howard would have been a good one too to serve under. Lack of alcohol though, but
yeah. I mean, I can think of
Caleb said, sorry, go ahead.
I mean, I can think of Hooker because he could be fun. I think he'd be fun. And he did well. He did well at Lookout Mountain, right? I know Chancellorsville, he kind of peed down his leg, and that's what it gets him for. He's pretty good at Antietam. He was only running the first quarter in Antietam because Reynolds got hauled back to Pennsylvania to defend Pennsylvania. So he was kind of acting as an interim. And if he doesn't get shot in the foot there by riding that white horse like friggin' Fabio, right? Maybe those attacks with the 2nd Corps and the 12th Corps are coordinated better. So I think the men fought under him.
Yeah.
But
that's a great question because it's one of those questions that gets you talking about like, why, and you learn about stuff. And I mean, I did not just go right to Howard. It took me a minute, a second, but like going Granbury. Jim Miller said Samuel R. Curtis.
Yeah.
Frank said serve under Hooker and Sickles. Party time. LOL.
Butterfield, right?
Yep.
But there are some people on the Confederate side, guys like Gordon, right? Where his men loved him, but he fought hard, and they never really lost a battle. Stedman was the only one that they really lost, but that wasn't really his fault. But I don't know. It's a good question. It's kind of where you fall back and how what you see.
Yep.
To be honest, I don't think meeting any of these guys would be any picnic personally. No. But I got all depends. I guess it falls back on what you think of it. That's a good question. It's one of those good psychological questions. Yeah. Some people, I don't think I definitely would not want to fight on Jefferson C. Davis. No thanks.
Oh no, right? not Jefferson C. Davis. Not Earl Van Dorn. Soy Smith. Nope.
Well, Soy Smith is a perfect example of somebody you're going to go with, and you're probably going to fall on your face because he's not. I mean, the Meridian campaign. Shaggy. Well, I mean, the Meridian campaign was. When he ran that cavalry to go get Nathan Bedford Forrest, he's incompetent.
Yeah.
I'd like to serve at a Pleasanton,
Oh, no, punchable face.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there are people
much of a
like
punchable
that.
Face as Josh Allen.
I mean, yeah, God. But again, that's the reality. I'd like to be under a person who's not going to throw me to the meat grinder. Someone who's thoughtful, someone who's smart. But again, like you don't get to pick. People in hell want ice water. So I guess that's just the way. Can't always get what you want, as someone once said.
Well, you and I last week we were playing the what if game, and well, not really, but and it was after I'd been talking to AQ about Barlow, and the one thing that I said, and I was like, well, here's the thing: if Barlow hadn't been wounded at Gettysburg, he likely would have ended up in the Western Theater. No,
he would have. He absolutely would have. There's no question he would have.
He would have been on the March to the Sea.
Yeah. No, he certainly would have. And who knows how his role changes either.
Yeah. And what that does for
Barlow.
him.
Poor Barlow.
Yeah, poor Barlow. Yeah. Poor Barlow. SLOC. She took her comment down, so I can't read it. It was just something. States' rights gist.
Yeah, well, you don't want to be with Underhood, any of those guys in Franklin. That's for damn sure.
Richard said Barlow was a knob. I disagree. Sorry, I like Barlow. He's a great commander.
He was hard. He was, despite the fact that he looks boyish and innocent and harmless. He was a tough SOB to fight with, and his whole thing with blockers was tough because don't forget too, he kind of got, pantsed a little bit by the Confederates over there, by Robert Rhodes's guys.
Yeah.
Right. Because you put some artillery there on Blockers Knoll, trying to force them up to take that spot, which they did. and then Gordon comes down the road behind them. It just you don't know they're coming. I mean, it's not like he knew they were coming, and then he did that. But you're figuring you're going to hit the McLean farm. You're going to be able to work right up and attack from the side. But he was aggressive. He was really good at Spotsylvania. I mean, he led those troops through that night march and got them where they were supposed to be, without getting too lost. You can take that march in the daytime now through those woods. And you find it. So he has some moments. But again, people associate him with Gettysburg here, and that's of course they're gonna. Why wouldn't they?
Yeah, and that's the thing is like you can't focus on just what they did at one battle. You have to look at the big picture, and that's why it really it bothers me when people are, like, oh, Howard sucked because of what happened at Chancellorsville. It's like, well, do you bother to look beyond that?
Well, that's the problem with it.
And the thing that you never hear about Chancellorsville is it's always 11th Corps sucked. They ran. It's never, wow, Stonewall Jackson had a really good day.
No, but that's whatever. That's how it's going to go, though. That's exactly how it's always going to go. People are going to find what they like, what they don't like, and that's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. No, and it's fine. Like people have their opinions and stuff, but it's like, as there are people, there's people in the war I don't like. I don't like Jefferson C. Davis at all for various reasons.
Well, okay, well that's fine, but no, it's okay. Man. People are gonna like what they're gonna like, and that's totally fine. But you can basically have, you can for the most part get a good idea of your own psychology by who you like, you don't like.
Yeah.
Right. That's the way it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think we see ourselves.
You know who I like Grumble Jones. Grumble
Jones. And no one questions what the nickname was because he lost his family and he was a grumpy guy.
I'll tell you right now, and this is what the greatest takeaway from the Civil War is the nicknames.
Oh yeah, Estella was mentioning that.
You cannot come up with a greater set of names. I mean, Shot Pouch Walker is a great one because he got shot so many times. They call him Shot Pouch.
Yep.
Grumble Jones, they called him Grumble because his wife drowned and he was sad, so they called him Grumble.
Yeah.
What the hell? I mean, it's just Blackjack Logan. I mean, that was because of his hair, though.
Yeah.
But even Stonewall
Jefferson C. Davis was.
I mean, the greatest nickname controversy, Stonewall Jackson, right?
Yep.
When Bernard B. gives him that nickname, he's killed soon later. And the controversy now was that a nickname of a term of endearment, or was it an insult? Was he standing like a stone wall because he was firm and resolute, or because he was standing around not doing anything?
I think it was because he was standing around not doing anything.
And because B didn't really like Jackson, I think personally that's probably what it was. And if that is true, the greatest nickname in Civil War history is an insult, which is awesome. Yeah. And we'll never know because B ain't talking. Again, the damn bees, Mary.
The bees.
It's the bees. And I have not forgiven you for making fun of that time when I was attacked by those bees, Mary. Not for nothing. You're still in the doghouse with the bees.
Here's a question: Did Oliver Howard put Jenny Wade in more danger by not ordering them from the house earlier?
I suppose. I mean, there are people who would refuse to leave their homes. They went in their basements. I mean, Jenny Wade. I mean, for all practical purposes, she was doing a service and all that. But what are you going to do? Josephine Miller wouldn't leave the battlefield to Gettysburg either. Yep. Tilly Pierce went down to work in the hospital. I mean, there are so many locals you can go read the. If you read Tilly Pierce's book, they talk about that. A lot of these cases, they stayed. Yep. You go to the museum up here at Adams County. You can go through that thing where you can live what it'd be like in the basement during the battle.
That's really cool.
I mean, what are they going to do? I mean, you can look at the whole thing with Elizabeth Thorne. I mean, she did finally leave, but I don't think she was too thrilled about it.
Nope, she wasn't. Clawhammer Witcher. Clawhammer Witcher.
He's another good one, But again, and so there are so many of these people with that, because unfortunately, people aren't always going to do what's in their best interest too. Yeah. These people have been hearing about the Confederates coming into Gettysburg for months before they finally came.
Yeah.
And so when they finally did come, it's like, well, I think I'm just going to ride this thing out here.
Yeah.
Now, the Jenny Wade situation is one where and you can take the tour and you can see everything and you can put your finger in the bullet hole and I'll tell you point blank that bullet did not come from the Farnsworth house. I don't care what anybody says over there. The trajectory does not make sense. But she was the story with the Skellies, right? It's fascinating. Jack and Daniel Skelly, and so there are a lot of personal stories. But yeah, that's the way it is.
James said he likes our nickname for Beauregard and Beauregard.
Yeah, no, he's somebody who he might be fun to fight under too.
Yeah,
when he overpromises. Well, yeah, Shiloh
promises under deliver.
Yeah, a lot of that though around though,
Yeah. Estella said Clara Barton served out in the fields during the fighting. She almost I love Clara Barton. She's amazing.
No, and that's the thing too, is these people put into a situation that was pretty harsh.
Yeah.
Obviously, just understatement of the century there, but a lot of them stuck it out.
Yeah.
I mean, the Jenny Wade story is unfortunate, but there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah.
Right. William Sando. Well, you got shot right over here.
Yeah.
McAllister's Mill Road over here, and so there's a lot of that.
Rocket Chickamauga.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of good nicknames. It's that's you make a whole list of those. I like Shot Pouch. That's a fun. Grumble's a good one too.
Shot Pouch was an angry fellow, wasn't he?
Oh, he was. Yeah, he was.
What about, it's not a nickname, but Sterling A.M. Wood?
Sterling A.M. Wood, one of the better names, and of course, States' Rights. Gist. We've been
As
corrected.
I was corrected.
We've been corrected on, you say gist because that's how it looks like it says.
Well, that's how it says. That's how
I know. Yeah. Maybe you said Henry Heth one time. Remember that?
Oh God, I got rid of that.
that was pretty funny actually.
Someone
that was 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was on another podcast I did, and they left us a 3-star review because they said I could not pronounce names properly.
So the Canadian can't pronounce Heth correctly. It's Heath. It's Heath. No, but there's a lot of there's a lot of words that are mispronounced too. That's okay. It just means you're reading. It just means you're reading. Versus, and you see it all the time. It's Hazlitt, not Hazlitt. You get that all the time. It's McPherson, not McPherson.
Yeah.
Because as the Scottish say, there is no fear in McPherson.
Yep.
You get that all the time. Botswan Swamp, Bolivar Heights.
Yep.
You get that all the time.
Yep.
It's actually Bolivar.
Bolivar?
Yep.
Bolivar. We should get ready to jump off here soon too. It's
already 11:30.
It's that time.
Yeah, it's going to snow here, Mary. It's going to snow. It looks like you're going to be shoveling again.
Imagine me shoveling. But yeah, thank you for everyone for listening to our episode. It's now available via audio if you haven't watched it on video yet on our YouTube channel. Thank you for your support with this and for hanging out with us. We had upwards of close to 40 people on here today, which is really cool. Not that we care about the numbers, it's that we love the comments, we love the discussion. Always learn something from the people who come on here.
No, what's good about it is it's good discussion because it's nice because it, like we said this a million times, there's not places in your real life that you can go to talk. And I like to think it's a non-judgmental thing. We're going to be doing another roundtable soon. We're going to schedule it probably not next week, maybe the following week
after. Yeah.
We're going to do a roundtable for those people who have done it before. It's just like this, but we bring everybody on, people talk.
Yeah.
For those who haven't, and so we'll put the word out on social media to sign up for that. But I think it's nice because I think you have to, you look at both sides. You try to be balanced. You try to don't try to be too, like we said before. I'm as union blue as they come, but I can appreciate that there were two teams on the field, and you got to study both, and vice versa. And I think I'd like to think it's a free, judgmental free zone. I guess I'm trying to say. And there's no, and unlike the stuff that you get hit on, because you get hit all the time with stuff. There's no right or wrong answer with this.
Nope, exactly.
There's really not. And so whatever you think is great about history, you can study it and you can make your own determinations and you can decide who sucks and who doesn't suck, Mary. Who sucks? The Buffalo Bills. They suck. They're going to lose. They're going to lose hard tomorrow.
I want the Chiefs to lose. Yeah.
Oh, Chiefs aren't going to freaking lose. That's kidding me.
Go Texans.
I know, but it's fun to talk about though because you can have a lot of fun with it. So hopefully the weather is nice where you are, but probably isn't. You stay safe out there, Frank, out in LA.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable what's going on out there, and it's one of those deals. But again, you have to try to live with it. And so we're going to get some snow here in PA and Atlantic Coast area, and hopefully we can have a good, safe weekend.
Yep. We will be back with y'all again. Hopefully, don't know if we'll be around next weekend because we've got some stuff going on, but we'll try.
We do. Oh yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Well, we probably should. Well, because the following weekend, I'm going to be shipping up to Boston. Don't forget.
Yeah.
So we'll have to. What we should do? We'll schedule a round table for next week, in lieu of a live. 'Cause I don't know if we're gonna be able to pull it off, because next weekend is
Yeah.
probably gonna be tough too.
Yeah,
And,
we'll let you guys know.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
we'll figure that out. So we'll definitely hit the bars tonight, Mary. We got to watch the Lions tonight.
Yeah.
Who are they playing? Oh, Commanders.
Yeah.
That's good. The division weekend is the best weekend of the year in football. It really
Yeah.
is. And so it's hopefully people have a lot of fun with that. Hopefully live safe, et cetera, et cetera. So any final words before we jump off? Again, real quick, before we do, this is the book. So it comes out on Tuesday, Somewhere Towards Freedom by Bennett Parton. Check that out. If you
can get it from Abraham Lincoln Bookshop. You can order it from there.
Go see Bjorn. If you are in the area, if some of the Gettysburg people who are on here, or the Susquehanna people, take a ride over to the museum. It's a free event, which is always nice. If it's free, it's for me, right? That's what they say. And you can go meet him. You can probably buy your copy of the book there. And we'll go definitely do it. So that's the 27th, I think. And so we'll see what happens. So
27th. So
we'll see what happens. So
So thanks everybody. Glad people are saying they had a good time this morning. So that's awesome.
Well, it's always fun to do this. It's kind of a fun place to do, and hopefully people can enjoy it. But go see Bennett if you can. Go see Bjorn, buy the book.
And you can also purchase the book online from him too on the bookshop. You get a book plate with Ben's signature in it, so that's pretty cool.
And he'll also be meeting with Bjorn. They'll be doing an online thing as well. So if you do that, Bjorn, tell him we said hello when you do, and try to go see. We'll be there a week from Monday at 5 o'clock. So hopefully we can see some friendly faces. Go see Bennett, see a book club, and talk about this book. So it comes out on Tuesday. So thanks for Simon & Schuster for giving us the advanced copy. We can read it. So we know stuff that no one else does right now. We're going to take advantage of that right now.
But and Bjorn said you can order the book and they will send it to you. So
definitely do. Always focus on the locals anyway. All right. So off we go. Have a great, safe weekend.